For some reason, it likes to delay. And we are back with another one. We've broke down with a couple people around Oklahoma, Texas. But guys, I want to give you guys a little bit more of an in-depth preview because you guys know I didn't play football. I don't understand the plays and the formations a lot. So I wanted to bring in a little bit more of an expert. But today we're joined by Captain 405. And listen, if you guys don't know who this guy is, you got to go follow him on Twitter and you got to go subscribe to his page because this dude not only puts out content around the in-game schemes, but he also covers a little bit of recruiting. So, hey, Cap, go ahead and tell everybody where they can find you and where they can find your content at.
Hey, Preston, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. So you can find me on Twitter at cap_405. Website is crimsoncaptain.com. The website Twitter account is crimson_cap. And that's where you can find me. We've got some YouTube work that's coming here soon. Not quite ready to push that out completely yet, but stay tuned for that.
Yeah, we'll drop that link down for his website below so that you guys can click on that. Make sure you go sign up. At least try it out for a month, see if you like it. That's all you can do, right? You can't judge it unless you at least try it for a month. So go ahead and check that out. But Oklahoma beat Texas. They're now 6-0, but I'm going to be honest, wasn't the most perfect game from both sides. And I feel like Oklahoma was kind of lucky to come out with a win in this one because Texas could have did their thing. So just from an overall perspective, what were your initial thoughts coming out of this game?
My initial thoughts were it was a fantastic game to watch as a fan, and the lead changes, the ups and downs, the drama, the good plays from both sides were plentiful, and just a fun experience to watch if you weren't rooting for one team or the other even at that point. And so obviously the outcome makes it a whole lot more fun if you're a Sooner fan. And that's really what struck me. The other thing that struck me was, we've had this idea of how much has OU improved. What do they really look like, or what can we really believe about them to be true? And some of that's been a little bit hard to really be definitive about because of their schedule and what that's looked like. And the analytics really have liked OU from the start. But this game for me was really good to see how OU measured up against what is a really good Texas team. And the other thing that jumped out to me is that Texas is a very good team. They are not overrated in any way, shape, or form from what you can see on the field. And that's, I don't think there was any question about that. They did their thing against Alabama on the road. You don't do that unless you're a good team. But to see a good Texas team on the field and to see OU perform the way they did and validate a lot of things that had been questioned about them is something that really jumped out. The OU defense is fun to watch again for Sooner fans, and I think if you ask a lot of Sooner fans, they would probably take a dominant defense or a defense that plays like what this version does over a prolific offense like what Lincoln Riley would put on the field. But the reality for OU fans right now is they don't really have to choose between the two. They have a bit of both at this point. And as much improvement as we know there is for OU to make in how they played and just uh, their overall performance, there's a lot of good there and a lot of things to build off of for the Sooners. And that was fun to watch. If you're a Sooner fan, uh, it was good to have a lot of those questions answered and also see a lot of room for improvement. And you talked about how OU and Texas, neither one really played a clean game. Yeah, some of that was self-inflicted for sure on both sides, but I think that's also a byproduct of two teams playing an opponent who is really close to them, and they're actually really good. When two teams play together or play each other, I think it's a pretty natural outcome that neither team is going to be able to do everything they want or perform exactly how they want, because a lot of the things that went wrong for Oklahoma were things that Texas forced or caused, and vice versa in the other direction.
Yeah, and you saw Oklahoma though, although they didn't play their best game, I definitely think they have room of improvement in the running game. You felt like although the defense gave up 527 yards, they played really well, and you got to see what I think we expected this defense to be this year. Because most of the game they were holding Texas when it mattered the most, and they created 3 turnovers. I mean, Quinn Ewers coming into this game had only thrown 1 interception. You got 2 from him within the first, what was it, like 6 minutes?
Yeah, exactly. And obviously OU has kind of made a name for themselves so far this year with the turnovers, and they forced a lot of interceptions already this year. So it was kind of a continuation of a trend for them. But for Ewers, like you said, he's not been uh, the one to make mistakes so far this year, and especially when you look back at the film. And there's a couple of plays that I've tweeted out. One in particular that was the second play of the game where Gentry Williams got the interception. If you watch the pre-snap activity on that play, it's really interesting to see what happens when Texas makes the final shift of their final formation in their pre-snap activity. Whenever they make that final shift, you see Danny Stutzman and Jaron Kanik almost simultaneously recognize the formation, and that triggers something that I'm betting that they saw in their preparation, in their film work, to say, okay, here's either the pre-snap motion or the formation or something, cause them to think, okay, we've seen this before, we know what's coming. And you see them almost simultaneously start to hand signal to the rest of the defense something. They're shifting something, they're communicating something. We don't know exactly what, but what you see happen is a couple of things. You see Ethan Downs move from his right defensive end spot. He had he was lined up out just outside the tackle. Whenever Texas makes that final shift, you see Stutzman and Canix run their signals and communicate to the defense. You see Ethan Downs moves from his right defensive end spot out wide to the trips formation, or to the receivers that are in that trips formation on the Texas left side. And as soon as the ball is snapped, you see watch what he does here. He blows this up. So what they're doing is they're protecting against that bubble play. And Ethan's job right there, based on that shift they made defensively, was blow that up so that the other two, so that Stutzman and Washington there on the screen can come in and clean up the play. Now, that goes unnoticed because obviously the play went to the other side. But watch, whenever Stutzman and Kanik start their signaling here, watch what Gentry Williams does. He's Gentry Williams, top of your screen. He goes from playing press to backing off. Now, we'd have to talk to them to know exactly what was going on there and what they were thinking. But what it looks like to me is they saw something in the formation that told them what the play was going to be. If you see Williams, he doesn't move a muscle the whole time that receiver is coming up on him. So he knows, I'm guessing he probably knows where that route's going to go. And he barely even has to move in order to cut Mitchell off there and intercept that pass. It's a really cool sequence to watch how the defense is working together as a unit, and it's something that you don't do that unless you have spent hours in the film room watching and processing things, and then to be able to translate that to a game and communicate to each other in that kind of time frame and run that kind of operation. It's pretty cool to see that play out.
Well, and it's interesting to watch that play because I feel like Quinn Ewers, it felt like he almost thought Gentry Williams maybe wasn't paying attention, because I don't know how he throws that ball thinking Gentry Williams isn't paying attention,
Yeah,
because Gentry Williams is right there.
I think there's a couple of things that Ewers is anticipating there. and well, a couple of things that's happening. One, he's expecting Mitchell to fight and cross Williams's face and win that route, because that's if you when you're it's kind of wide receiver 101. If you're running a slant, you're supposed to cross the face. You are not supposed to let the defensive back cut you off on the route. And the other thing that's happening there, if you see it on the play, whenever the ball snapped, Ewers gets pressure up the middle from the defensive line. I think it's Kelly or Co. I can't remember or can't see who that is exactly. Oh, it's Bothroyd, I think, there on the end. And so he can't really step into it, and he's I would bet his view is probably a little bit obstructed there too when you look at it. And so he might not be able to see exactly whether or not Mitchell is crossing his face, and he's got to throw that with some anticipation too in order for it to be on time. There's a lot going on there. The bottom line is that if I'm a Texas wide receivers coach, I'm telling Mitchell he's got to win that route there. He's got to cross his face. He can't let Gentry cut him off like that and get the INT.
No, 100% agree with you. And like I said, overall, I feel like the defense came out and they did what they needed to. And that's just one example of the adjustments that you didn't see last year. We've heard just how much time Danny Stutzman sits in that film room, and I think it's really starting to show. So I love to see that. So kind of diving a little bit into the offense. So I'm not going to say the offense struggled, because when they wanted to go out there and score the ball, they definitely could move the ball. The question is the running game, which has been the question all season. I think your leading rusher outside of Dylan Gabriel was Jalil Farouk, who only had 3 carries and took it 13 yards for a 4.3 average. So it feels like Oklahoma needs an identity there, and they really just don't have it yet. So, I mean, going on through the rest of the season, what is the key for Oklahoma here in the rushing game? Because if you have to run up against Texas again, my thought process is if you bring in Javonte Barnes and Gavin Sawchuk, or shoot, maybe even some of these freshmen, depending on how healthy those guys are, and they can play, you're possibly giving Texas a completely different look, because you're able to control that game on the offensive side of the ball. So, what is your thoughts there on the offensive side?
Yeah, I've wanted to see OU try some different things at running back over the last couple of games, especially as it's become clear that Javonte Barnes and Gavin Sawchuk are having difficulty getting to the point health-wise where they can come in and be their normal selves, if you will. And so Marcus Major and Tawee Walker have been effective. Marcus Major, less so. I think he's, and this has been covered, I think, in some other areas, but Marcus Major is suited more to a team that's really good at running outside zone and those kind of concepts where he can make those outside runs, make a single cut, and go. The type of running plays, the gap scheme and stuff that OU is proven to be best at so far this year don't really suit him and his particular running style. And there's other times where you see Major who leaving some yards on the field, so to speak, where he misses a cut. He needs to cut it inside as opposed to running outside to where the blocker is or to where the defender is. And so there's been some things that have just caused me to say, it would be nice if we could try somebody else at that spot. Tawee Walker has been a revelation this year, I'll say. I mean, he's been totally unexpected, and I was skeptical in the first couple of games about whether or not he could be OU's lead back and whether or not he was the best choice to be running out there constantly. But the more I see of him, I think he's got a really good place in the rotation, at least. That said, the next guy in behind Tawee Walker, I would like to see more of Gavin Sawchuk to see if they can really get him going and get him healthy, knock the rust off, get him confident in his legs again to the point where we really can try and see if he's going to be that guy this year at any point. Absent of that, I would definitely like to see Caleb Hicks or Dalen Smothers in there just to see what they can do. And I think there are some opponents coming up that OU will have an opportunity to run those guys out there in situations where the game isn't in doubt and just see what they've got. And we'll see how that goes. But you can't deny Tommy Walker at this point and his impact and just how good he is. He really saved OU in a couple of instances against Texas. He made some really good runs in critical situations. He's proven an ability to be able to make a cut and make somebody miss, but he can also run over people. We've seen that on more than one occasion. So uh, I definitely don't mind seeing him out there. I would just like to see somebody else get a chance to see if we can't find a dynamic running back that could complement Tawi and see what happens.
Yeah, and I think your best bet is Sawchuck, just because we've seen him a little bit this season. But Dalen Smothers, I really like this kid. We've seen him quite a bit, or at least we saw him in a couple of the earlier games this year. But Tommy Walker, like you said, he did have probably one of the bigger plays of the game where Oklahoma was backed up at their goal line. I don't know if you remember this, and I'm kind of figuring out it was after the goal line stand. I'm trying to figure out, well, how's OU going to get out of this? Well, Tommy Walker just uses his short frame and runs right through those Texas defenders for a 12-yard run and gets us out of that scenario. So Tawi Walker is a big impact for this offense, and he's a really physical guy. Now, on the offensive line, which is, we were talking about it in the green room, one of the keys for Oklahoma, they lose McCade Matower, and I mean, I'm not sure if he's going to be available for the rest of the season. I mean, that injury looked pretty bad, and he had to be carted off the field. So where does Oklahoma go on the offensive line from here? Obviously, Caden Green played really well. He's going to be able to plug and play. You've had Troy Everett in there at times this season. Who replaces McCade on that offensive line?
So who they go with is especially at the right guard spot is going to be an interesting question. I personally would like to see Jake Taylor get an opportunity at that spot. If Caden Green does get the start at left guard, which I think it's kind of hard to not start him there at this point, because Troy Everett is a really good player. He's given the Sooners a lot of quality reps at that spot, but I think it's pretty obvious Troy Everett is more suited for center. He's undersized at guard. He had a difficult time with somebody like Tavondre Sweat for Texas during that game. He won some battles there for sure. He didn't have a bad outing, but he's just not suited to that position. You're not putting him in a position to be successful if you're expecting Troy Everett to go in and play left guard against, even Texas, but even somebody like Ohio State or Alabama or some CFP level type opponents. And if you're not going to have, and if that's not your best option at that competition, you'd like to see Caden Green get those snaps so that he can get as much experience before you hit a rematch with Texas or a bowl game or CFP or something like that. That's kind of my thinking as far as how I would approach it. But as far as the right guard position, I would anticipate that if Caden Green does get that left guard spot, they might try and see if Savion Byrd can go over to right guard. Somebody like Jake Taylor or Caleb Schaefer played the remainder of that game and showed pretty well. They have some options, I think, to see what's going to work there. But those are the ones I really want to see what Jake Taylor can do. He got a lot of really good talk in camp. He's the second team right tackle right now. So and he's shown some versatility between guard and tackle that Bill Biedenbaugh really likes. So we'll see, and you could see Troy Everett there again too. I think he could be another option on that right side. We just don't know. There has been some talk that Metallier's injury wasn't serious enough to keep him out for the rest of the season, but I don't think he's going to be back. I wouldn't anticipate him being back for another 2 or 3 weeks. But we should get more clarity on that this week, I would think. But those are the options and how I would like to see things moving forward with the offensive line. I would personally be surprised if Caden Green doesn't get that spot, but we'll have to see how practice goes this week or next week as they lead into the next game week against UCF.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is you come off this game, you go right into a bye. So you get an opportunity to evaluate where your team is at injury-wise and get people healthy. But looking at another injury on the offensive side of the ball is Andrel Anthony, right? Your number one wide receiver this year. I mean, it feels like the number one target for Gabriel. He goes down in this game, but Jalil Farouk steps up. Now, obviously, if there's any position, I think, on this team that you're able to lose somebody, it's probably at the wide receiver position just because it's so deep, right? I expect there to be portal exits this year because there's going to be guys that can't get playing time because they're just not going to be able to crack the rotation. And that's not because they're not any good. It's just because that room is so good and there's so much talent. It's going to be hard to compete there. So, where does Oklahoma go with the receiver room if Andrel Anthony's out for an extended period of time?
Yeah, and saying that there's a lot of different options at the wide receiver position to make account for injury is kind of a wild thing to say or for me to think about because going into the season, there were so many question marks. Nobody really knew what we were going to get from that room. And what's proven out over the last 6 weeks is that it's the wide receiver room is one of the deepest spots in the whole team. And not just depth where you can go out and get some decent reps from people. You've got playmakers at each spot that are 2 and 3 deep. So I would anticipate that you're going to see a lot more of guys like Jaden Gibson and Nick Anderson. Jaquez Petaway will definitely get some more opportunities there. Those are the immediate guys that I think they'll try and use to fill that gap. There's no denying that Andrew Anthony is going to be sorely missed, and you really feel for him because of the kind of guy that he is and just the season that he was having to date. But yeah, Anderson and Gibson and Petaway are the guys I would anticipate them trying to fill that role with, and we'll see who steps up. But I mean, those are really good options for trying to fill that role, and we'll see what happens.
Now, do we know what the extent of his injury was? Because it didn't look good from the TV.
Yeah, I would anticipate that it's a long term injury. I would not expect him to be back this year, and we'll see what the school announces as far as the official word on the injury. But from what I've heard, it's not good, and I wouldn't anticipate him being back this year.
Now, there's guys on this roster that we haven't really seen a whole lot of, like LV Bunkley Shelton. I think you've seen Brennan Thompson a couple times. Does this open up a room for them, or are they kind of like, hey, they're not the same kind of player like Andrel Anthony, so maybe they don't necessarily crack that opportunity? They've got to wait in the wings for somebody else.
I think if guys like Bunkley Shelton get an opportunity, it'll probably be in behind those first 3 guys that I mentioned. At least that would be my anticipation.
Okay. All right. So obviously we got to talk about the kicking game because OU fans, they were jumping on Twitter because Zach Schmidt missed the field goal and Plaster got hit the end zone and Texas was able to score off that. Kind of ironic, right? Oklahoma gets one the week before, turns into a safety. Texas is actually able to keep this one from going out of the end zone to be a safety, and they capitalize on that opportunity. Now, in my opinion, I think it's better that they get a touchdown there instead of it being a safety because instead of it being 7 points or instead of it being 9 points, it's only 7. So, Oklahoma or Texas could have came back and scored a touchdown and made it 9 points. So I think that was okay on their part. But man, it feels like Oklahoma's struggling in the kicking game, which I mean, when you go look at the numbers, Zach Schmidt it's not like he's terrible, but this just isn't the kicking that Oklahoma is used to. So is there anybody else that can kind of just step up that we're not watching? Because we do not have the Burkich that we used to have.
I don't think they've got anybody currently on scholarship or on the roster who's going to step in and suddenly be better. Now, they're going to look, they're going to try. So we'll see. But yeah, it left a lot to be desired. I'll just say that, just trying to be nice about it. But the punting was not good, and the kicking has been good as far as the percentages for Zach Schmidt. But the thing that you really have to keep an eye on, I think, is the fact that his range is and his overall leg strength just isn't what we're really used to seeing at a school like Oklahoma. And the one that he missed was 45 yards, and it was into the wind, but it didn't even get to the crossbar. So, they're in a tough spot. They've got a lot of work to do. They either need to find a way to make the guys that they currently have in those positions serviceable, or they need to find different solutions. And I can assure you, there's going to be a lot of thought and work put into that over the next couple of weeks to try and get them into a better spot. But based on what you saw on Saturday, you start thinking about holding student tryouts to see if somebody from the soccer team can come in and help them out or something like that. But maybe pull the guy that they had on the game day set in pregame to try and see if he can help them out. I don't know, man. That's being a little bit facetious, but just to try and emphasize the fact that the efforts they had against Texas just aren't going to cut it, especially in these later season games. You get to a bowl game or a CFP game, and you don't want to be having that kind of performance on special teams, because it will not end well.
Well, and I don't feel like you want to take this kicking game to probably Lawrence, and you probably don't want to take it to Provo either, because I feel like those are going to be two away games where you want every advantage you can have possible. I feel like at this point, if it's not a 30 or 35-yard field goal, Jeff Luby has to consider, depending on the yardage, to go for it, right?
Yeah, I think you're kind of forced to, just based on the odds of Zach Schmidt making something from that distance versus going for it and getting it. I mean, it's not a good position to be in if you're OU.
Yeah, no, totally get that. So kind of giving an outlook for the rest of the season. Oklahoma 6-0, and I mean, you look at their schedule, it's hard to say that Oklahoma can't lose another game, but I mean, when you look at the schedule, it's cakewalk. And I think a lot of us, we looked at this schedule and we tried to be as realistic as possible and said Oklahoma is going to lose probably at least 2 games, maybe even 3. But this team has made such a drastic turn from last year. It's definitely changed our mind. So I'm looking at the schedule, and the only game I'm concerned about at this point is Provo, because I feel like that could be a night game. Got elevation changes. It could be snowy. Who knows? Just different environment. Now, Lawrence, Kansas, I feel like it could be a tight one, but not one that you're necessarily in jeopardy of losing. So when you look at the schedule, what do you expect for Oklahoma going forward? Because, I mean, I don't want to say that they're going to go undefeated, but it looks like they're going to go undefeated.
Yeah. Well, we've seen how this team handles adversity, right? The next big test is, how do they handle success? People had been down on them and talking trash and doubting them leading all the way up into the Texas game. And now that's going to be almost completely reversed, where they're going to be praised. They're getting all these nice things said about them. They have proven themselves to be a good team. They have had success on the field. They're getting that adulation, if you will, from the public and talking heads. How are they going to handle that? Are they going to keep that same intensity, that same energy that got them to where they are right now, or are they going to read their press clippings, so to speak, and get a big head and lose some of that focus that has been so critical to their improvement to date? And I think that's an open question right now.
Yeah.
And so what you're seeing is recruits, hearing that message from the Sooner staff, and then everything that they were told about how it's going to go and what it's going to look like, they're seeing it. And then to see the freshmen get their opportunities and play like that, it's also, just a kind of a icing on the cake as far as what a recruit needs to see and what's going to get them excited.
Yeah, no, and I've talked to a couple 2025 guys the day of and hereafter, and it really seems like Oklahoma is starting to get higher on their list. I specifically talked Kobe Sellers, and we're able to put this out there. But he said it's by far that OU Texas game, he said, is the best environment that he's been to, and he says it sucks to see one of those schools lose, because he says they both deserve it. They were both really good. Unfortunately, you just have to have a loser. But Oklahoma, he said it's climbing on his list. So he's going to try to get back for a game soon this year. So it's going to be interesting to see just how this 2025 class develops. Now have seen Oklahoma put out a comparable defensive product, because I don't feel like you've gotten that with the Riley era. And although Riley had Dindy in that class committed, I didn't feel like he was keeping him, especially with the way that Texas A&M was recruiting that year anyways. So Riley or Venables, I mean, it just seemed like it was inevitable that kid was going to end up leaving Oklahoma's class. So glad to see Oklahoma recruiting defense really well. But I don't really feel like there should be any shockers at this point for the 2024 class.
No, I would agree with you there.
So, all right. Well, hey, we appreciate you coming on. We appreciate you talking a little bit of Oklahoma football. So again, before I let you go, I want you to tell everybody again where they can find you guys, where they can find you at, where they can find your website at, and what kind of content are you pushing out up there?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, where can people find you at? Where can they find your website, and what kind of content are you pushing out on the website?
Yeah, you can find me at cap_405, crimsoncaptain.com. We're pushing out recruiting updates and all kinds of information about the team and things like that.
All right. And if you guys haven't already, make sure you just do the little housekeeping that we ask you to. Hit that like, hit that subscribe button, and hey, keep tuned in. Oklahoma's 6-0. I'm sure they're going to get that win against UCF, and I'm sure we're going to have a fun season.